Daas Tevunos. We're now on page 99, Sadik Test of the Daas Tevunos. For those who are following the paragraph system, we're still in paragraph Kuf Yud Ches 118. And Ramchal now is developing. He gave us the concepts earlier in the Sefer of Hester Panim, Ha'oras Panim, Guf, Neshama, Tov, Ra, Shleimus, Chisorin, perfection, imperfection, good, evil, the physical body, the soul, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's the light shining of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the Bria. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Hester upon him, where he sort of covers up and he's not shining his countenance, as they would say. His countenance is not shining on the Bria. We developed all those ideas, and these ideas are now coming together. And what we learned about last time we studied Daas Tevunos, I believe on Sunday, we're learning about HaKadosh. Everything HaKadosh Baruch Hu created is created. It's a yesh me'ayin. It started as the Yuli was a yesh me'ayin, right? We learned about that Nachmanides in the Bereishis Shir, the Ramban. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created two particles, the Yuli for this universe and the Yuli for the universes above. Yuli Oretz, Yuli Shamayim. And then the Rebbeinu Shalom everything the Rebbeinu Shalom created didn't exist before. Even the idea that something was in a state of potential is absolutely false, the Ramchal explained to us. The idea that something can be in a state of potential before it becomes physical reality is an idea that was created by God as part of creation. None of this pre-exists creation. All of this is inside creation. What was here before creation? God, and only God. That's it. And as God's creating the world, ideas are being created by God. And all of these things, the Ramchal uses the word chidesh. HaKadosh Baruch created something new. And one of the new things he created was the idea of shir, midah, and the big word, hadraga. The Rebbeinu Shalom created this idea of stages. We just learned about that in Yeshaya. The stages of destruction. It didn't occur, and it doesn't occur over a split second. It's a hadraga. That's the way the world works. The world was created with a system of time. Time means that things move. They can move quickly. They can move slowly. But they don't happen, boom, and everything is done. And that's why the Rebbeinu Shalom created the world Bahadraga. He created with 10 Vayomers, 9 Vayomers and a Bereishis. He created the world with 10 Vayomers, or the equivalent of a Vayomer. And he did it over 6 days. He didn't go, boom, let there be a world. And everything would have been here anyways. We discussed that. The Rebbeinu Shalom created the world Bahadraga. Day 1, Day 2, Vayomer 1, Vayomer 2, and we live in a world of hadraga, step by step. And step by step means good things happen. Sometimes people say, it was just in a split second, everything was okay. It was a split second, everything was okay. In a split second, you realize that everything was okay. But everything is a developmental process. It's in stages. It happens over time, fast or slow, but it happens over time. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this idea of boundaries, time, things begin, things stop, gevulim, shir, measurements. And this is the world that we live in. Given that this is the world we live in, a measured, a limited world, or what we sometimes call a perfectly imperfect world, we now continue on page Sadik Tes. Kidei Livro, Friedlander's caption, Kidei Livro es hara, in order to create evil, Hister Hashem Yisborach es panav behester gadol. Hashem Yisborach, the Rebbeinu Shalom, created a great hastoras panim. We've already talked about several times what hastoras panim means in this context. Let's read the paragraph. We'll see if we need to review that concept again. V'nimtza, the Ramchal writes, therefore we find, shebiyosahu yisparach tofes b'shtei hamidos ka'achas. We learned several shiurim ago that the source of creation and the source of supervising creation. Remember, we talked about two separate things. God willed things into creation, and then God willed that they continue to exist. And the Ramban Nachmanides explained this to us beautifully in Bereshis when it says, Vayomer Elokim, for example, Yehi Or, God said, which means God willed that there should be light. That only means that the light came into existence. Vayar Elokim es ha'or ki tov, God saw the light as being good. Nachmanides disagreed with Rashi and Ibn Ezra. It doesn't mean that God suddenly realized, oh, this thing I created is really good. Let's do something with it. The Ramban rejects that kind of interpretation, even though that's definitely not what Rashi and Ibn Ezra meant. But it would appear that you can read that into the words. And the Ramban obviously rejects that and taught us that the words Vayar Kim Kitov, and he proved it, means that the Rebbeinu Shalom made a decision that it would continue to exist. So Vayomer, God willed something into existence, which we call hishabus, something comes into existence. And Vayar Elokim Kitov, God saw it's good, means that he willed it to continue to exist. And that's called the kiyum, the continued existence. We've gone through this enough times. There is no default setting that because something exists in 1 second, it will exist the next second. Because I was able to breathe a second before doesn't mean I can breathe the next second. It's all a chesed min hashemayim every single second. So there is no this default setting. We live under a constant state where the Rebbeinu Shalom is giving us and sustaining us and maintaining us. So there's the creation and then the maintenance of that which was created. In both cases, there's the source of both of these, the source of both creation and the continued existence of creation comes from these two materials, so to speak, these two sources or these two ideas, Hester Panim or Ha'aras Panim. God created the guf through Hester Panim, and he created the neshama through Ha'aras Panim. It's part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ha'aras Panim. And that's how God created. And then God maintains the guf and the neshama through a Ha'aras Panim and a Hastaras Panim. But at that point, once we have guf and neshama, we're exercising our bechira as to whether we want the guf to be dominant over the neshama, which will bring a Hastaras Panim in our life, or we want the neshama to be dominant over the guf, which will bring Ha'aras Panim into our life. It's all up to us. Do we want to bring more darkness and confusion and chaos in our life? So we will continue to feed the guf and make the guf the balabayas in our lives. The guf is sourced in Hester Panim. And if you say to God, I like the guf, or as we learned in Yeshaya a few minutes ago, let's eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we will die, that's what will happen. You will designate the guf as the balabayit, and tomorrow such a person will die, never to be heard from again. No olam haba. A person who designates the neshama as the balabayis, and the neshama is working on the guf to perfect and lift up the guf, such a person is bringing Ha'aras Panim in his life. The neshama comes from Ha'aras Panim. You designate the neshama the balabayis, you're bringing more light, you bring more clarity. Light means I can see things clearly. by making the neshama the balapayit, you bring clarity into your life. You can see things from a different perspective. You understand them from a different perspective. Or as Chas v'Shalom, you bring hester upon into your life, that guf, that dense darkness, that confusion, that chaos. Those are the different types of life that a person can choose for himself. It's an active choice. That's the bechira. V'nimtza, the Ramchal says, should be Yosu who Yisborach Tofes B'shtei Hamidas Kachas, while HaKadosh Baruch Hu is holding on to these two midos, Hester Panim and Ha'oras Panim. And again, I want to remind everyone, without going through all those shurim about it, that in truth, there's only one midah, there's only one source, and that source is Ha'oras Panim. And even in the what we live, the Hastoras Panim, the chaos, percolating inside all that chaos is ha'oras panim, to bring the geula shleim of Yameinu. It's all driving. It's all driving to the goal of bias Mashiach tzidkeinu of Yameinu. All events are driven towards there. You just have to have that Rabbi Akiva set of eyeballs that we talk about so often to see it. So really, at the very basic bottom, deep source, we're talking about pure ha'oras panim. And the fact that we see confusion and chaos in our lives is because we suffer from lack of Rabbi Akiva vision, but percolating in there is all ha'oras panim. But again, as we live with our eyes and our perspective, we see ha'oras panim, we see hastoras panim. V'nimtza shebiyoso hu yisbarach tofes b'shtei amidas ka'achas. HaKadosh Baruch Hu holds on to these two midos in one time, ha'oras panim, hastoras panim, behester panim v'ha'oras panim shezachanu, yolidu mizeh, what births or the ramifications of hastoras panim and ha'oras panim is haneshama v'aguf. Shedivrei haguf yubchusim mishel neshama, the life and the needs and the desires of the guf are much lower than that of the neshama. And this physical body that comes from hester panim will have imperfections which the neshama doesn't have. Lo mipnei zeh yebora. It doesn't mean that the guf is evil. The Ramchal made that point a page ago, I believe in Tzadik Zayin, that malachim are not perfect. Nothing's perfectly perfect. Only the Ribbono Shel Olam is perfectly perfect, and that's the way it'll always be. No one will ever get to God's perfection. Period. The end. No matter what a human being does, no matter whatever happened, they're never going to be perfect like God. So a malach is not perfect, but there are malachim, Michael, Gavriel, the holy angels, the Srafim, the Oifanim. There's nothing evil about them, but they're not perfect. So the Ramchal demonstrated for us that something that's imperfect doesn't mean that it's evil. It can become evil if the imperfection that exists is then used for evil purposes. The Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, Adam Arishan, had this vacuum area. He was perfectly imperfect to a great point. He was literally almost as perfect as you can get. He was created by the handiwork of God, and he had this one challenge. And if he succeeds, then that area of imperfection becomes perfect, and the world, and he lives forever, and the world has a completely different future. Instead, in that area, which is called his bechira, and that's the area which was left imperfect, he brings into it Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, and he eats it. Now that imperfect area just became evil, and that evil can continue to grow if you make those decisions to allow it. So the Ramchal again says, because the guf is created from hester panim, means it's imperfect, but it doesn't mean it's evil. Amnam b'tzoso yisbarach l'chadesh metzias hara. When the Ribbono Shel Olam wanted l'chadesh, this is a new thing. He's going to create a new thing called ra, evil. Shua hepech l'shleimusa yisbarach mamish. This evil This is an idea that is completely opposite of the perfectly good God, Kemoshe Biyanu, as we've already explained. Hine oz hister ponev hester hayoyse godlush ev shalabshe. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he wanted to create this idea of evil, he used this idea of hastaras ponim. Remember, again, there are different ways to talk about ha'aras ponim and hastaras ponim. If we understand, let's go back for a moment. If we understand there's no default setting, and therefore we need every second, every millisecond God's chesed. That's what we say this so many times, the Birchas HaShachar. You wake up in the morning, you went to sleep last night, and your vision was fine. With glasses, without glasses, with contact lens, without contact lenses, you were able to see Baruch Hashem. You went to sleep. You woke up in the morning, you open your eyes. You say Birchas HaShachar. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam pekech ivrim. And you make this bracha every day of your life, and you use God's name, which is a serious thing to do. You use God's name, two God's names, Hashem Elokeinu, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam pekech ivrim. You give sight to the blind. Who is the Rebbeinu Shalom talking? What are you talking about? You were sighted yesterday. Why are you making a bracha today? Thank you, Hashem, I'm sighted. Because the fact that you're sighted yesterday doesn't mean you're sighted today. And the fact that you're sighted a second ago doesn't mean you're sighted the next second. It's a chesed and a shemaim every second. Well, chas v'shalom HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's called ha'aras ponim. Hashem is, so to speak, giving you attention. He's looking at you, and he's delivering affirmatively good things to you. Your sight, your liver working, your kidney working, your heart working, your brain working, your lungs working. He's delivering these things to you in an affirmative way. Chas v'shalom hastaras ponim doesn't mean that God sends. We talked about this so many times. God doesn't send people heart attacks. It's just that Rebbeinu Shalom is saying, Reuven's heartbeat, Reuven's heartbeat, Reuven's heartbeat, Reuven's heartbeat, Reuven's heartbeat. God doesn't have to say Reuven's heart stop beating, Reuven have a heart attack. There's no default setting. God's chesed, God just doesn't say wait. And then the ramifications become self-evident. So ha'aras ponim is God constantly shining upon us and bestowing upon us in an affirmative way his chesed. Hastaras ponim means that God is not shining upon us. He's not looking at us. He's not sending that affirmative chesed. The ramifications are what they will be given whatever the depth and the seriousness of that hastaras ponim. So when God wanted to be machadish this idea, he wanted to bring in this new idea of Ra into the world. The way he brought it into the world was through this hastaras ponim. Hastaras ponim will result in Ra. Until there's this hastaras ponim without the ha'aras ponim. Through that, there are certain things that get created that can literally ruin something. Chal's referring to what we learned about earlier with Rav Friedlander's comment. Viruses, bacteria, these are things that these are living things, these are living organisms that can be seen today under a microscope. And the question became, Ramchal, the Seichel said to Neshama, God didn't create evil. And the Neshama asked the Seichel, what do you mean he didn't create evil? There are literally diseases in the world, and these diseases in the world destroy and ruin man. There's all kinds of evil in the world. What do you mean God didn't create it? And then Ramchal went through what we had several long shurim about the two stages, the two phases in creation. But the Rebbeinu Shalom, in the initial stages, is creating the idea that there's going to be my ha'aras ponim. There's going to be this hastaras ponim. And the depth of the hastaras ponim, depending upon the depth of the hastaras ponim, will result in evil. And where there's a hastaras ponim, that in that stage, in other words, God didn't say there is going to be strep. God created an idea of ha'aras ponim, and he created an idea of hastaras ponim. And now in the second stage or the second phase, in the place where there's a hastaras panim, a heart attack can occur because Hashem is not sending the chesed anymore. In the place where there's a hastaras panim, a strep can develop. And is in that area, in that second stage or phase of creation, where these havayas have seder mamish, these creatures or these things can come about that ruin the bria. And at that state, the Rabbanu Shalom also created these angels that are mashtas l'chabel, destructive angels, the angels that went, for example, and destroyed Sodom. V'nimtza klal hara, asher hu yisborach heishiv, therefore, klal hara, the general principle of evil, asher hu yisborach heishiv acha yeminai mehel hagas ha'olam, HaKadosh Baruch Hu drew back his right arm. The right is always signifies chesed. The left signifies din. So the Ramchal is telling us in a martial kind of way. And when the Ra comes to the world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sort of draws the right hand back. The chesed, the ha'oras panim, is drawn back. And that's the words in a pasuk. Heishiv yeminai achar. V'yinageo b'chvedus. And now the world is going to be supervised, managed, and maintained bichavedus, in a heaviness, in a darkness. Tokef choshech sisro, the depth, the strength of a deep darkness. V'sam batev alov kol hefsede hatov. And in this stage of creation, of this hastaras panim, the Rabbanu Shalom put in, quote unquote, the nature of the Bria, all these destructive kind of things, diseases, illnesses, bacteria, viruses, infections. Halohema kol midas based in. We would call all these things the midas of a based in. A based in has the power on earth to punish a person, give you 39 lashes. It can do other things to a person. And the Rabbanu Shalom, when the Hester Panim Chas v'Shalom comes up, the Rabbanu Shalom is running the Beis Din. The Beis Din is going to discipline and punish through the Hester Panim. L'havi b'mishpat al kol nelam u'rishoyim, to bring to judgment all that was hidden, but the Rabbanu Shalom knows about, and all the Rishoyim. V'omnam, however, you need to know. This comes from a Gemara in Brachos and Dav Zayin Amud Aleph. The Gemara talks about God getting angry every day. That's the famous Gemara we learn about. Rashi quotes it, I believe, in Pashas Balak, the very famous Medrash Chazal, that Bilam knew how to calculate the exact millisecond that God, quote unquote, God gets angry every day. Well, again, God doesn't get angry. We've talked about that many times. It's as the Rambam says in Perek Aleph of Yesodei Torah, Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't get angry. It's Dibra Torah Koloshim Adam. The Torah communicates with us so that we can understand it. We understand the word angry means Reuven's angry at Shimon, and Shimon may expect something to happen because of that anger. When we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu is angry, doesn't mean he changed his mood, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't change a mood. Otherwise, he's talking about Hashem, a human being. So it's not that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wasn't angry, and then he got angry suddenly. Ridiculous. And in Mir Hashem, I've said this several times, we're going to have to learn the first parak of Rambam Yesodei Torah. We learned part of it once. We're going to have to learn the whole parak to understand these concepts. B'ez Hashem will get to that. But Baruch Shalom doesn't himself, quote unquote, he doesn't get angry. But the Gemara tells us that Bilam knew that exact millisecond where HaKadosh Baruch Hu gets, quote unquote, angry. And that's the millisecond he was going to say the curse over the Jewish people. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu did a tremendous chesed that during the whole period of the Bilam affair, the Rabbanu Shalom didn't get angry even for that millisecond, so that Bilam's curses never worked. In fact, everything became blessings. So Gemara says, Zamoy shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu rega. The anger of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, quote unquote, lasts a millisecond. And the Gemara there has different girsois. You can take a look if you want on Brachas Daf Zayin Amud Aleph. The Gemara has different calculations. We have different girsois. How long is this second? 157th or 158,888 of whatever. The Gemara has a calculation. We're talking about milliseconds. And during this millisecond, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gets angry. God doesn't really have an anger. In other words, God gets so steamed up that it lasts for hours. And it means that in a millisecond, and God doesn't live in a millisecond either, he doesn't live in time. But again, this is what the Rambam means in Yesodei Torah. We have no way of talking to each other. We have no way of saying a shir. We have no way of learning unless we talk in our human words. A millisecond. There is no millisecond in God's world. There's no time in God's world. But in order for us to talk about how small the time can be, we say a millisecond. But again, there's no time in God's world. But because God is running the world and he needs to discipline the world at times, and he disciplines the world through, quote unquote, a Beis Din, and this Beis Din and disciplining occurs through a Hester Panim. This Hester Panim literally is a millisecond. But what can happen in a millisecond can have ramifications for centuries, can have ramifications for thousands of years. So we're going And the sole purpose of this second, this millisecond of anger, is so that all these shluchim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has, he's using poetic language here from different places, the snakes, the burning angels, they come to the world. They were created by the Rebbeinu Shalom in, quote unquote, that what we would call the second phase of creation, the idea of this evil. They come to this world to discipline and punish the Rishoyim according to their rishus. So we're going to stop here for today. What we need to understand right now is we haven't talked really about the human being yet. And we're going to see that Bli Neder when we pick up next time with Rav Friedlander's footnote 223. Right now, we've been although we talked about the Guf and the Neshama, what we've been talking about the Guf and the Neshama is the source material. How did the Guf come about? Hastaras Panim. How did the Neshama come about? Ha'aras Panim. Where does evil come from? Hastaras Panim. Where does good things come from? The Ha'aras Panim. We talked about the creation of the source material. Now that we have an understanding of the creation of the source material, we're now going to talk about what that source material did with the Guf and the Neshama, and how the world and how man continues to exist in this Hastaras Ha'aras Panim, and how the world continues to function in this Hastaras and Ha'aras Panim. Ha'aras Panim. And on a good note, Ha'aras Panim. All Yidden need Yeshua should have Yeshuas, all Yidden the Chamas should have Chamas, all Yidden Refuah should have Refuahs, all Yidden Bracha should get all the brachas of Baruch Shalom, send the Shefa, Toiv, you're a Toiv Meitiv. The whole tachlis of the world is Hatova, you should say Toiv Meitiv, Mamish, today, Bert Seincha. You should send today the ultimate Toiv to say Mashiach Tzidkenu, to let us build the Beis HaMikdash, to bring the Matzis HaShekel, to be able to bring Karbonis. So we can get out of this chaos, this Hastaras Panim, and be Zeicha to your Ha'aras Panim today, Brit Seincha. Brachas, Yeshuas, the Chamas, Refuahs can only come through HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Echad Yacham Yuchad. They can only come when he comes, when he wants it to come, how he wants it to come. If he wants it to come through a shliach, through the shliach that he wants it to come through. Because he's the Echad Yacham Yuchad, he's the absolute sovereign over all these things. But we do our Hishtadlus, we don't sit back, we do Hishtadlus, and the Rebbeinu Shalom blesses our Hishtadlus. B'racham v'chol ma'aseh yodcha shetase, the Torah tells us. We should continue to do our Hishtadlus. And as we internalize these ideas, we're doing our Gilei Yichud. Everybody does a Gilei Yichud, donates it to Klal Yisrael, and through donating it to Klal Yisrael, we bring this Gilei Yichud to its critical mass. So B'tzayin Chamamish, the Rebbeinu Shalom, save us already from this chaos, save us from this sinking ship. So Mashiach Tzidkenu can come today, but Mamish, and we can dance and sing with him. We should be healthy. We'll take care of ourselves. So we're healthy for you, Rabbi Shalom. We're healthy to greet Mashiach. We're healthy to build the Beis Hamikdash. We're healthy to bring a Machzis HaShekel. We're healthy to bring Karbonis. And we'll be able to dance with Mashiach Tzidkenu Mamish today, but Refuah Shalema to Moshe David Halevi, Ben Leah, Moshe Avrik. I heard that he's Baruch Hashem doing a bit better. So Baruch Shalom, Chesed and Hashemayim, please continue to give chizuk to Moshe David Halevi, Ben Leah, Refuah Shalema, Psach Shachar Yisrael. Refuah Shalema to Liba Malka Baschaya Braina, Refuah Shalema, Yosef Shalom, Ben Yosef Chaim, Ben Shoshana Menucha. Cholcholi HaKorona, Besok, Shacholi Yisrael, Force Never Shavuos Aguf, Hashtavak Alois Man Kriv and Imam. Amen. Everybody have a wonderful, healthy, Kishmak day, Bekashmis of Baruchnias. And Yetz Hashem will meet on Thursday morning. There's no Shia tomorrow. Everybody's like Mamish today. The world is in chaos, mamish in chaos. There's nowhere to turn but the Rabbeinu Shalom. People are going to start talking about there'll be new elections. The new elections coming in Israel. Everything's going to be solved by new elections. Rabbi say, stop the talk. Nothing's going to be settled here except through Mashiach Tzidkenu. Sei gesund.